Right, this should be a very, very short video. It's just a little appendix to the rook and pawn versus rook vertical cutoff video. One of the positions I look through on that video is this one from a 1987 game. It's black to play. I basically offered these two choices, king f5 or king f3, and I said that king f3 actually leads to some interesting but not really textbook stuff, which is, you know, we need to explore. And it's not easy to understand where king f3 leads. It's definitely not easy to look into it. But what I claimed that we should be able to do, and even a player of my level I think should be able to do this, even though that a player miles better than me didn't do it in this game, is we should be able to look at king f5 and decide, you know, it's a fairly forcing calculation if white wants it, and get to a position that's actually just lost. That was my argument, and I left it up to you whether or not you agreed with me or disagreed with me. So a fairly forcing line here is rook f1 check, king takes g4. I mean, all black could do there is take the h-pawn. King g5 is absolutely the next move that everyone will play there, because we've already got the king cut off on the f-file, and we want to advance the g-pawn, so that's a no-brainer. At this point, black would think, well, okay, I want my rook defending from the front. That's how you defend successfully against a vertical cut-off one file, so I'd play rook h8. And now the only way that white can win this is they kind of want their rook on g6. So you'd basically need to analyse back here. Oh, if I go down that line, so I'll play king f5, or white can play rook f1 check, king e6, king takes g4, rook takes h2, king g5 surely, rook h8, and I'm going to start checking him from the front, but he's going to want to try and get his rook to g6. Can he do that? And so you've just got to visualise, you know, the white king's here, the black king's here, and the white rook is down here. And yeah. Okay. And I'm claiming that even a player of my level is capable of doing that and rejecting king f5, which is what happened in the game, you know, and white went on to win that very comfortably. There's the block. Okay, and a bit of messing around, but the Lucena position was pretty soon reached. But in banging on and on that point, I forgot to actually go through the interesting king f3. So I'm claiming that even a player of my level should have the ability to calculate that, analyse it through, see king f5 is lost, and just say, well, king f3, I'm not really sure what's going on with that, but there's going to be some pawn swapping. I've got lots of space back here to at least fire off some checks. Let's try it. Let's see what happens. You know, and you can obviously analyse it a bit more deeply than that as well. But it does lead to a draw. King f3 is a drawing move, so we might see rook f1 check, and the king comes in here on a sort of a pawn raid mission. Rook f4. It doesn't look good, does it, to get your king the wrong side of the pawn. King takes h2. King takes g4, and then rook a8. And I reckon as black we could analyse it that far. We could get, you know, that sort of, again, a reasonably forcing line, and say, well, I'm not really sure what goes on there. That's definitely not one of the textbook positions we need to know about. There's no vertical cutoff or horizontal cutoff. It's all a bit. I mean, there is a horizontal cutoff, but we've got sort of lots of space to attack the king, check the king from the front, and we've also got this weird sort of tail hook thing going on, with the king grabbing onto that g-pawn, so that might give us a chance. I don't know. I reckon we could do that. I reckon we could get that far. Rook f2 check, king g1, and what does white do? Like, if they just move their rook along the second rank to cut the black king off, you can see the black rook's going to start checking in a sort of weird, it's almost like the Philidor position in the wrong direction. It's very strange. I mean, it is. If this white pawn was coming this way, we would sort of have the Philidor position, wouldn't we here? But it's going the other way. But still, the white king has no shelter from the checks. So white would have to pop up back here with rook f5, and black says, all right, well, I'm still hooking onto your g pawn. I'm still sort of tail hooking your g3 pawn. We might see rook g5, trying to block those checks from coming in, and black just sticks their rook on the f-file. I mean, how does white make progress here? They played rook g5 to defend the g pawn, so they can now advance the king. King can't now advance on the f file, so maybe advance on the h file. And then the black king can follow it. If the g pawn advances, rook h8 check, king g6, rook back to a8. And white's rook's just sort of really awkwardly placed. You kind of want to play your king to g5. What you want to do here really is sort of get your rook out the way, play your king to g5, and come back here and check that black king out of here. It's a very interesting position. A sort of I don't know. I mean, it doesn't go in any of the boxes of rook and pawn versus rook. Most probably because this sort of position just occurs so rarely that no one's thought to study it. But this is a draw. Anyway, very interesting line, king f3. I would say that in a game, there's no knowledge at the end of it. You know, there's no sort of textbook stuff that we could say, oh, I play that, he plays that, blah, 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 and then we end up in that position. Oh, I know that's a draw, I know that's a loss or whatever. That's impossible. There's no way you can follow king f3 from here. But I think you can. I think it's possible. I think the level we should aspire to is king f5, forcing line. The rook f6 check was difficult to spot, maybe, but it's spottable, and we know that position's a loss. Anyway, those are my thoughts.